A lot of people have what's called multiple tank syndrome, meaning you like to have lots of aquariums, lots of fish tanks, all kinds of things going on. Today I'm going to tell you guys how you can have a small fish room for less than $1,000. Hey fish friends, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. Zenzo with Tazawa Tanks. So I get a lot of questions from viewers about my fish room in regards to the cost, what it costs to put a fish room together, and what it costs to run it. So I thought what I would do is share with you guys today kind of some of the simple steps that you can take to build your own fish room and kind of walk you through what those costs might be and talk a little bit about the monthly cost moving on as you have your fish room established. So let's say that you have decided that you want to have a fish room, meaning that you've designated some place in your home, whether it be a bedroom, a spare bedroom, or a part of the garage, or a basement, whatever it may be, where you have decided that you are going to have fish in that area and it's just going to be dedicated to keeping aquariums. So in doing so, there's a few things that you need to consider. Obviously, you need to consider the actual space itself. Is it strong enough to handle all that weight? Preferably it would be something that would be on a lower level or a slab where you have a concrete floor and that floor can support the weight of all the aquariums. In addition, when thinking about a fish room, you have to think about things that could go wrong, spills and stuff like that. So again, if you're thinking about what room you're going to use, do keep in mind that sometimes tanks will overflow when you're filling them or changing water. You will have spilled water on the ground. So think about kind of your area and what's going to work best for that. I like having a hard surface, like right now I'm on a concrete pad. I've seen other people do concrete pads themselves or linoleum and stuff like that, or like a high traffic commercial carpet without any padding works well also. So again, think about kind of the structure. Can it maintain that weight? And if you do have an accident, which I promise you will at some point, can that space handle that mess? So once you figured out your space as far as structure and flooring, the next thing to think about is water. So it's pretty self-explanatory that when you have lots of fish tanks, you need lots of water. So when you're doing water changes, you'll need a place to drain the water. And when you're doing water changes, you need a place to tap into to fill your tanks back up. So you want to make sure that wherever your fish room is, that it's close to a water supply and close to a place where you can drain the water. Ideally, you would have something like some kind of like a garage sink or something like that near your fish room, or a bathroom near your fish room to where you can pipe water from your fish room to that area to drain it. And then also a place where you can tap into a spigot to be able to bring fresh water back to your fish room. What you don't want to do is have to carry water in buckets. You don't want to have to carry garbage cans full of water down a hallway, because in the long run it's going to end up being a mess. You're not going to want to do water changes. It's going to be too labor intensive and your fish room is going to suffer. So you figured out where you're going to put your fish room. You've made sure that it's strong as far as the flooring. You've made sure that it can handle spills. You're near water. You're near a drain. Now you got to figure out what kind of fish you want and what kind of tanks you're going to need to keep. So if you're doing breeding, you're going to think about lots of small tanks to separate fish, mothers from the fry or parents from the fry, and growing fry out, and then having larger tanks to keep the adults when they're not breeding, and also to keep the juvenile fish as they grow older before you trade them or sell them or give them away or whatever it may be. Or you might decide that you just want to have kind of a bunch of display tanks, and you know exactly what each tank is going to have as far as inhabitants. So regardless of what you're going to keep, just make sure that you do your homework and really understand the needs of those fish as far as breeding and habitat and tank size. Think about all of those things before you set up your fish room, because what you don't want to do is set it up and then realize, oh, I set up a bunch of 10 gallons, I really need a bunch of 20 longs or 29s or whatever it may be. So again, think about the space that you're going to have, the fish that you're going to have, and what's going to work best for you. Okay, so we figured all that out. You figured out what you're going to do, how you're going to do it. Now let's talk about costs. So when I talk about cost, there's two things that you really need to focus on. That is heat and that is filtration. So when it comes to the cost of a fish room, energy is going to be one of the most expensive things. So you might think, yeah, buying the tanks and building stands and setting up the filtration and all that stuff is going to be expensive. It is initially, or it can be, although there are some shortcuts that you can take, but really the costs are associated with the energy bill. So what does it cost to run these tanks every month for your electric bill or your gas bill? When you are setting up your fish room, you have to think about heating that room or heating the tanks and how you're going to filter those tanks. So my recommendation, if you're going to have a fish room, and this would be for anyone who's keeping, let's say, more than a dozen to 15 tanks or so in a small enclosed area, and that would be to heat the room rather than heating each individual tank. And there's a couple reasons why. The first reason is it's a lot easier to control. If you are only having to worry about the ambient temperature in a room, it's a lot easier to control that with a heater, a thermostat, a dehumidifier, whatever it may be, so that it's constant. And it's also very easy to check. All you need to do is walk in the room. You can put a thermometer on the wall like I have here. It is much easier to heat the room than individual tanks. The other reason why I would recommend heating the room rather than tanks is heaters fail. So not only are heaters expensive and having to buy multiple heaters for multiple tanks, but they do fail from time to time. Instead of having to worry about a heater failing in a particular tank and having the temperature crash in that tank or having it get really high, which happens sometimes, all you're worrying about is the temperature of the room, which is a lot easier to control, and then the tanks themselves will be heated by the temperature in the room. So heating the room is going to be more cost effective in most cases, and also less prone to having something go wrong. So as far as heating the room, there are some different options. It really depends on where you live, as far as the climate, and how that room is constructed, insulation, square footage, etc. So down here in my basement, I kind of have a sealed off area. So this area is not huge, and I've got it insulated on several walls here. So I actually do not need the heater for probably 10 months out of the year. And the only time I really need to turn the heater on is when it's really cold. And when I say really cold, I live in San Francisco, California, so it's not a very hot place, but we don't get cold either. So if it's in the 40s, it's really cold to us. And I know some of you guys that live in the north or the east coast might be laughing as far as it being cold here, but seriously, so when it gets cold for us here in California, it might be in the 40s, and during those few weeks when it is cold like that, I do have a space heater that I can heat this room. But the majority of the heating is done with the dehumidifier. As far as filtration, you do have a lot of different options, obviously. So you can do, sumps, you can do canister filters, hang on the back filters, box filters, matten filters, sponge filters, and everything in between, right? But my recommendation is, if you're going to have a fish room, is to run it on air. By running it on air, that means you're going to usually use a sponge filter, or you could do like a matten filter, which also uses air to kind of create that current in the tank and draw the water through the matten filter. The reason why I would recommend air is it's really simple and it's really inexpensive, and every time you add a tank, all you have to do is add another sponge filter, which are really inexpensive, a line of tube from your central air system, and you're good to go. As far as air, there are some different options. So you could do kind of the small individual air pumps, and you could run sponge filters off of those, and you could do a few tanks off of each of those individual air pumps. Or you could do what I do and a lot of other people do with larger fish rooms or medium-sized fish rooms, and that is to run a central air system. So when you run a central air system, it's all run off one pump. It's plumbed with PVC, and then you just use the lines. You just use air tubing and drop them down from valves, and then you can run those to each different tank. So now let's talk about the cost of the fish room. Now that I've talked about some of the basics as far as establishing your area and making sure it's all set, and then figuring out how you're going to heat that area or heat the tanks if you do choose to go that route, and also filtration. So the first cost that's going to be probably big on your mind are the tanks themselves. My recommendation is, once you've decided what you're going to do for tanks, is to look for bargains. So you could do, Craigslist as an example. You can do your local fish club where they have auctions. You could also do the dollar per gallon sale that they have at Petco here in the United States. So every few months here in the US there's a $1 per gallon sale, and they sell tanks all the way up to 29 gallons at $1 per gallon. So a 29-gallon tank will cost you $29 plus tax. Depending on where you live, the tax will be different, obviously. The tax is based on the original price of that tank. So go out and get some deals. You can do the $1 per gallon. You can find used tanks. Usually when you're getting a used tank, do some homework and you know, don't just I wouldn't buy anything off of Facebook Marketplace because those prices are the worst. But look on Craigslist, look at, you know, talk to some fish stores and see if they've got any extra stuff. You can usually get tanks for about 50 cents on the gallon if they're used, and then obviously if you're getting a new tank you could do the $1 per gallon. So let's just kind of use some simple math here just to make this easy. So let's say that you are going to have a small fish room and you're going to have 15 tanks, and you have decided that you're going to do 20-gallon tanks. So with those 15 tanks, let's say that those 20-gallon tanks are roughly about $20 a piece. So you might have paid more for some because you got them at the $1 per gallon sale, so they were $20 plus tax. So maybe they're 25 bucks or so, or 30 bucks depending on what the tax rate is. And then maybe you found a few that were used from some friends, and maybe you got a couple for free, you got some at the auction at the fish club. So let's just say that they average out to be about $20 per tank. So if you have 15 tanks, that is $300. So your initial cost for your fish room is going to be $300 for those 15 tanks. The next thing that you need to think about is what are you going to put your fish tanks on? So you need some kind of stand. You're not going to put them on the floor. So you can build stands out of 2x4s and 2x6s. You can do what I do, which is the concrete block method, which I learned from Corey at Aquarium Co-op. So that's stacking up concrete blocks and putting 2x4s or 2x6s on top of them. They're very strong, and I use them for all of my tanks from 10 gallons up to 90 gallons. So the 90-gallon tank with all the rock and everything in there is close to 900 pounds. So they do very well at holding that weight. That racking system, depending on where you get your materials, will probably cost you right around $100 or so. The concrete blocks are really inexpensive. You can get them at Home Depot or Lowe's or any other building supply for less than $2 a piece. And then 2x4s are not that expensive, so depending on what grade you're getting and where you're getting them from, you could probably get all your racking material for about $100 or so. So that would be your concrete blocks and your 2x4s. Now if you do decide to build racks, then you might have a higher cost if you need to buy more lumber, if you need to buy screws, things like that. So now we've got to talk about heating the room. And let's just say we're going to use a dehumidifier in this example. The dehumidifier, they range in price, and again, it's going to depend on your location and the size of room that you have. So you can probably find them as low as $100 or so used, up to maybe $300 plus if you're getting something new. So I think that there's a lot of deals out there that you can find for probably around the $200 range. So let's say that your dehumidifier is going to cost you right around $200. So now you've got your tanks, you've got your stands, you've got your dehumidifier. Now let's talk filtration. So let's say that you've decided that you're going to run a central air system. That central air system is going to run on one pump. And for about 15 tanks or so, you're probably going to spend around $100 for the actual pump. I would get like either a small linear piston pump or a diaphragm pump from a company like Gemco. So that's where I got my my pump from. But there's, again, deals to be had. Check the auctions, check eBay. But definitely you want to get something that's heavy duty and made for fish rooms. And then in addition to the actual pump itself, you're going to need to get PVC, you're going to need to get the valves to drill in or tap into that PVC, and then you're going to need airline tubing, etc. So let's just say, for simple math again, that's going to run you right around $200 for the pump and for the parts and supplies that go with that to run air to your tanks. So now that we've got all that figured out, we still need to do one more thing, and that's actually think about the cost of the supplies in the tank. So that might be decorations in some cases, it might be plants, substrate, or you might just do bare bottom tanks and just kind of open tanks like I have right here behind me. So these tanks here are bare. I've got a couple little things in there, some little pieces of PVC for some of the small fish to hide in, and some crushed coral and stuff. But basically it's just a tank and a sponge filter. So you're probably going to average right around $10 or so per tank for the supplies for that tank. And again, sometimes you might get stuff for free, sometimes you might spend 20 bucks. But even if you were to buy a sponge filter for every aquarium, you're probably only going to spend right around $7 or $8 per tank. So we'll just kind of round it up to 10. So again, if you are getting 15 tanks, all 20 gallons with sponge filters, etc., you're probably looking right around $150 or so for supplies for those tanks. So there you have it. So that's kind of the whole fish room for less than $1,000. We've got the tanks at $300. We've got the dehumidifier at $200. We have the filtration at $200. We have the supplies for the tank at $150. We've got the racking system for $100. So that's about $950. So give or take, depending on what you're spending and where you are in the US, or if you live in another part of the world, you're probably looking at anywhere between $900 and $1,000 to build a fish room that's going to have 15 20-gallon tanks. Now obviously that doesn't include the fish, that doesn't include water conditioners and things like that, so we're not going to get into a lot of the minutia as far as the inhabitants and what they cost, and how do you, factor in the cost of chemicals and stuff like that for the aquarium. For the most part, that's really minimal, so it's not really a huge factor when you're looking at the upkeep of the aquariums. However, talking about upkeep of the aquariums, there is a huge cost associated with it. I talked about this at the very beginning, and that is the energy cost. So again, depending on where you live and what type of energy source that you have, your energy bill might be quite high. So I will share with you that where I live in California, and I'm running 35 aquariums, 29 of them are down here in a heated room, and then the rest are upstairs, so those are heated individually. Our energy bill is anywhere between $300 to $350 per month. That might seem kind of a lot, and it is a lot, but also if you think about how many tanks that you are taking care of, it's not so bad. If you have half that amount, your energy bill might be half. As an example, if you're down at, if you have 15 tanks or so, but you still have to think about what that energy cost is going to be on a monthly basis, and that never goes away. So that's something that you have to account for when you do build your fish room. The other thing that a lot of people don't realize is if you have a lot of tanks, you usually have a lot of fish, and if you have a lot of fish, you have to buy a lot of food. So fish food, depending on what type of fish food that you have and what type of fish you're keeping, it can be expensive. If you have some larger fish, obviously they eat a lot. If you have a lot of fish, like a lot of fry that grow quickly, they eat a lot. If you have certain fish that you're trying to breed and you need to do live foods, those might cost a lot initially. Or if you're getting them from another source, they might cost a lot. So there are a lot of things to consider when you are looking at keeping your fish room as far as your kind of monthly ongoing costs. So definitely your energy is going to be one, and your fish food is going to be one. So be prepared to drop a couple $100 or so per month on maintaining a fish room, between all the food and supplies that you're going to need and running the fish room as far as energy is concerned. So for those of you that are thinking about keeping a fish room, I hope that was helpful. I hope that I gave you some ideas as far as what to think about before setting up your fish room, what the cost might be before you jump in, so that you can have an idea, plan, and budget for it. Before I go, I do want to mention a couple things. Number one, the Aquatic Experience is coming up. If you're not familiar with the Aquatic Experience, it's a huge aquatic/fish tank aquarium convention with a huge expo hall with lots of vendors that are going to be there. A bunch of YouTubers are going to be there as well, fish YouTubers. There's going to be different talks on different subjects. It is a 3-day convention. It's Friday, October 19th through Sunday, October 21st. I will be there on the 19th and the 20th, which is the Friday and Saturday. So please make sure that you say hi to me if you're going to be there. And on that note, don't forget that I do have a bunch of Tazawa Tanks t-shirts still available. I have been shipping them out on a steady basis. So for those of you that have ordered shirts already, thank you very much. For anyone that is going to the Aquatic Experience, if you show up on Friday or Saturday wearing a Tazawa Tanks t-shirts, you will be in my Aquatic Experience YouTube video. I will make sure to, if you want to be, of course. I'm sure if you're there, and you have your shirt on, you probably want to be in the video. So if you're wearing your t-shirt, I guarantee that you will be on the video. If you have your own YouTube channel, I will of course tag you. If you have an Instagram, I'll tag you there so that people know who you are. Or if you just want to be anonymous and just show your face on camera and be in the video, then I don't have to tag you on anything. T-shirts are available on my website, which is www.tazawatanks.com. All that details down in the description. This video is coming out on Wednesday, October 10th. So not a lot of time before the Aquatic Experience. If you do want to get your t-shirt, you've got to get your order in before Saturday the 13th. And if you get your order in before Saturday the 13th, I will make sure that I send those out via FedEx, and you will get your shirt at your home prior to the Aquatic Experience so that you can have it and show up there. That's all I had for now. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next one.